You know the feeling. It's 2 a.m., and your mind is building entire futures. You've planned the business, mapped out the move, drafted the conversation, felt the victory. You fall asleep wired with possibility. And then morning comes, and something in you just dims. Not because you forgot, because some part of you already lived it last night. And now the doing feels like a pale imitation of the imagining. If that pattern sounds familiar, I want you to know something right away. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not lacking discipline. What you are is a particular kind of person with a particular kind of mind. And once you understand how it works, everything changes. Picture this. You sit down to start something. Maybe it's the project you've been thinking about for months. You open the document, the canvas, the plan, and for a moment, your body floods with sensation. You can feel yourself doing it, being it, succeeding at it. Your nervous system registers the action becomes for the at energy. That stranger is exactly what makes starting feel pointless. Because in the vivid theater of your imagination, you've already completed the loop. The brain processed the reward. The emotional circuit closed. And now the actual step one has nothing left to offer. Most people call this procrastination. Psychologists sometimes call it an identity mismatch. When the imagined self and the actual self aren't in conversation, they're in competition. But I think it's more specific than that. I think what's happening is that your mind is incredibly good at simulation, and it hasn't learned the difference between simulating an experience and having one. Here's what most people miss completely. You don't dream big because you're naive. You dream big because your mind is wired for depth. You don't imagine elaborate futures because you're avoiding reality. You imagine them because your inner world has texture and color and detail that most people simply don't experience. You feel things in advance. You rehearse emotions before they happen. You map out possibilities with the precision most people reserve for their actual memories. And here's the cost of that gift. When you can feel the outcome before the action, starting the actual process feels like wearing a rough draft of a life you already lived in perfect clarity. The gap between the polished mental version and the uncertain real version creates a kind of friction that makes every first step feel like a step down, not a step forward. But that's only part of it. The deeper layer is this. Your brain is doing something extraordinarily human. It's protecting you from the possibility of failure by giving you the experience of success in advance. It's not preventing you from doing something. It's giving you the dopamine of doing it without the risk of doing it. Which means underneath all that dreaming, there's a quiet fear. Not fear of failure exactly, fear of the gap between who you imagined yourself to be and who you might discover yourself to be when you're actually in motion. And this is where it gets complicated, because the fantasy isn't the problem. The fantasy is beautiful. It's evidence of a mind that can see beyond the obvious, that can hold complexity, that can want something so badly it lives inside the wanting. The problem is that your mind hasn't learned how to hold both the fantasy and the uncertainty of the real attempt at the same time. It treats them as competitors, so one always gets sacrificed, and it's usually the real one, because the fantasy is safe and warm and already yours. There's another mechanism at work, too. You might have noticed this. When you dream big but don't act, it starts to feel like a secret you carry. You don't tell people about the ideas because you sense that speaking them out loud makes them smaller, makes you smaller. So you hold the vision privately, which keeps it alive in your imagination, but also keeps it disconnected from any external accountability, any real feedback, any proof that it could become something. You become a keeper of private futures, and that feels like protection, but it's actually a form of isolation. Psychologists sometimes call this self-handicapping, creating conditions where failure can't really count against you. If you never start, you can never truly fail, and your imagined identity stays intact. You protect the story of who you could be by refusing to let it be tested. It's a form of self-loyalty gone sideways. You're protecting yourself from disappointment by guaranteeing it. But here's the paradox that most people never arrive at. The reason you dream so vividly is the same reason action feels hollow at first. Your inner world is not a refuge from reality. It's a preview of it. Your mind is rehearsing what it actually wants, preparing you for a life you haven't built yet. The problem isn't that you have a rich inner world. The problem is that you haven't learned to trust that the outer world can match it. You believe in your imagination, but not yet in your capacity to make it real. And this is the beautiful contradiction at the center of how you're built. You look like someone who doesn't want it enough. Inside, you want it so much that you can taste it without eating it. You look like someone with no follow-through. Inside, you have already lived 100 versions of success and felt them with complete emotional truth. You look like someone who's afraid to try. You are someone who is terrified of discovering that the reality is less beautiful than the vision. Not because the vision is more exciting, but because you know exactly how beautiful it could be. Now, I want to be honest with you here, because understanding why you do this matters, but so does knowing when it becomes avoidance. There is a version of dreaming big that is actually a beautiful, creative process, a place where ideas gestate and possibilities unfold. And there is a version of it that is a cage made of hope. The difference is subtle, but important. In the first version, you feel a pull toward action, even through the resistance. In the second version, the dreaming itself has become the destination. If you notice that your visions are getting more elaborate, but your life is staying still, that's not a sign you're broken. It's a sign that the pattern is asking for something different from you. What it might be asking for is permission to be imperfect in the actual. Permission to start before you're sure. Permission to feel small and uncertain on the outside, while your inner world stays vast and vivid. The gap between those two spaces isn't a failure. It's where the work happens. You don't have to choose between dreaming and doing. You have to learn to let them be one movement instead of two separate lives. Your imagination isn't the enemy of your reality. It's the first draft of it. And drafts exist so they can be written into existence, not just admired from a distance. So if you recognize yourself in this, know that your mind is not working against you. It's working ahead of you. It's just waiting for you to trust it enough to move with it, not behind it. You were never meant to live only in the vision. You were meant to build from it. Here's a question for you. When you imagine yourself failing, do you feel it as clearly as you feel yourself succeeding? If yes, that's not weakness, that's depth. And it means the same capacity that's kept you stuck might be the one that carries you through. Next, I want to talk about something adjacent. Why some people can act on their plans while others need to feel completely ready first. And what happens when you finally stop waiting for the permission that never comes. If this resonated with you, you'll want to see that one.